Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santee, doing my best to have thoughts and use words. Joined by Richard Cohen. Oh,
hi, everybody.
He's zen like a mofo, his t-shirt says. Mine just says Ball State. It's very boring.
Oh.
And Lizz Nolasco.
Yay.
I'm wearing flowers if anyone cares.
She's flowery.
Lovely.
So we're gonna.
And she recently gave birth to a human being, so I feel like that's more important than any shirt.
How long do I get that badge? Because he's almost one now.
18 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. You just get to use it as long as you want.
That's right.
Okay, so we're gonna talk a little bit more about holidays. We did a straight to video episode about Halloween. Halloween time, and knew as we recorded that we needed to talk about holidays again. We all sort of agreed that there was more to say, and it's holiday time for a lot of people, so we thought this is a good time to do that. So I'm going to start with a quote from Julie Bisson's book. I think that's how you say her name, Bisson.
Yep.
And it's called Celebrate: An Antibias Guide to Enjoying Holidays in Early Childhood Programs. And this book's been around for a while, but she just recently published a new edition, like within the last couple of years. So I was working through the new edition, and I think there are significant differences in her positions and recommendations between the two, if anyone's curious about that.
I am. I'd like to hear from you. What's evolved?
I said I would have to prepare specifically for that conversation, more than I've prepared for today, but we can do that. I love to do that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But our quote is, "But using holidays to anchor learning about other cultures runs the risk of trivializing a cultural group by implying that the most important thing about it is a holiday, promoting misinformation about a cultural group by disconnecting the meaning of the holiday from the context of daily life, and promoting views of quote unquote exotic people who don't do daily life activities, but rather sing and dance and eat special foods. Such approaches overemphasize the difference between people rather than demonstrating the ways in which we are both similar to and different from each other." I feel like there's a lot of directions that could go, but I want to just ask if either of you have an immediate response to it before we get further.
Well, you won't be surprised to know I do.
Yeah.
Liz probably does. I just always beat her to the punch.
But, I know Liz does, because when I sent her this quote, she said, "Ooh," with an exclamation point. So.
Oh, you want to start, Liz? Go for it.
If you've got an immediate formed thought, go right ahead. I'm still forming.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, it's not really, I just wanted to point something out in the passage that what's her name just read.
That would be Heather.
Yes, the nerd.
Yeah.
It's in the first three words, I think. Other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about how to teach about all cultures or how to teach about our culture.
Mm-hmm.
This quote is specifically about how do you address cultures other than the one that's most prevalent where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one of the biggest challenges to me around the topic of holidays, well, no, actually of any anti-bias work in our field, is it's a different set of strategies when you are in a heterogeneous or diverse classroom community than if you are in a homogeneous classroom community where everybody is of the same culture or looks the same, whatever that might be. It's a different set of strategies. You know, if we believe that children benefit most from concrete learning of things that are familiar and meaningful to them, it's a whole different conundrum when people who are different than us are abstract because they're not concrete and meaningful in our little universe. So to me, I don't know I'm not saying the answer to it. I'm just saying, I just, for me, wanted to clarify that seems to be the context of this particular book.
Okay. But I think that's, she starts by saying, but using holidays too. And I think that's what sort of started my thinking here, because
Right,
that's
right.
what we do so often in childcare programs and whatever the early learning setting is. We sort of set our whole year's themes around holidays and use them for our own I'll say agenda, but I wish I had something more nuanced.
We don't need to talk about Mexican culture until Cinco de Mayo.
Right. And we think that we're including, but really we're othering.
Right, exactly.
These other groups, anyone who isn't like me must be exotic, and we'll look for 2 or 3 times a year that we can talk about how they are fancy.
So now that we've defined the problem, Liz is going to tell us the solution.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's my turn now. All right. So, no, I mean, I guess the thing that I really am stuck on is learning about other cultures, because I have very varied thoughts and questions and no good answers here. Because I think, we live in a diverse society in a very broad technical sense, and early learning programs are the most segregated settings for children. It's early learning programs in church. And the idea of learning about a group when no one from that group is present feels like almost impossible to do well. I mean, I think there are so many ways to teach that there are so many different people in the world and around us and in our cities, even, that we just don't necessarily see every day because of the circles we run in. But I think that's where this more embedded anti-bias approach is necessary, rather than focusing, like you said, on the holidays, or even on, even if we're able to deconstruct and do it well, bring in people who actually celebrate the holidays, but we're still stuck in that this is what these people do. I think there's so much more value in bringing in images of people and actual people of other cultures. One of the big things that I've tried to do is, when we have guest experts come in for different projects that the kids are doing, is try to bring in people from different groups that the children are not necessarily seeing, who are experts in a particular topic. They see these people as competent and capable and intelligent and, equal.
Yeah. I think about that.
No, go ahead, Heather.
I think about that all the time. I mean, that's one of my big hangups about holidays. And that's why I kind of had moved to just not doing any holidays in classrooms where I was working, is the idea that I'm sort of stuck between 2 ideas. One is that, and I think Louise Derman Sparks in her anti-bias book talked about the hopefulness of anti-bias work, and sort of the optimism that we bring to it, or that it brings to our work. And I do think that we have a tremendous opportunity to maybe raise a generation of kids who just think, Hanukkah, for example, because Hanukkah's starting today as we're recording. I think it's starting today. Is that right?
I think it was
last night. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Anyway, we have an opportunity to raise a generation who don't see that as a strange, different thing. Because most of us celebrate Christmas or whatever the holiday might be. But then also this idea that I don't want it to be just a tourist kind of approach, or I want to make sure that what I'm presenting or offering is authentic and not exotic images of people being different than I am. And it's a hard balance for me to find. And then I get tied up when like Liz, you're talking about bringing in experts. And then I think, well, I don't want to ask, some marginalized group to do all the work for me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was not clear enough. Experts in different subjects. So not like, bringing in a family who's an expert on Diwali because they celebrate Diwali, but bringing in like a parent who, works in the theater because the kids are
Oh,
putting
sure. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you clarified. But I have that thought too, because when I think about wanting to make it as authentic as possible, then I need to learn from somebody or somewhere. So anyway, that's just my very long way of saying I haven't figured holidays quite out myself. I know what I'm not comfortable with. I know what I hope and wish, but the implementation is difficult for me.
I know that my experience as a child is often the only Jewish kid was taking on the role of teacher anytime someone knew a holiday was coming up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was great because I was super shy and loved getting called on and asked to talk in front of the class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in.
Please.
Yeah, building on what you both said, where my mind went to. I mean, yeah, sorry, I don't want to steamroll over Liz. I really want to acknowledge I was also the only Jewish kid. And there's a lot of people, or there may be a lot of people listening to this podcast that were the only fill in the blank in their classroom community. And so you have my empathy, and many people can relate to that feeling of being in a spotlight or tokenized rather than sort of being normalized and feeling like you're just another part of this fabric of this community, but you're set aside. So, oh gosh, my mind goes to so many places. So when we talk about behavioral guidance, for example, and we try to explain to people why to stop timeouts. And we say, well, a timeout is just a behavior that's reacting to the child's behavior, and you're not getting to what's below the surface, right? Oh my goodness, I had an amazing analogy and it's just left my brain.
Keep talking, it'll come back.
Oh, right. Okay. Thank you, Heather. You're such a good facilitator.
Thank you.
I
know you don't mean it, but thank you.
I'm so not used to thanking you for things that I just totally got my brain out.
I know. Thousands of listeners just turned it off. I got it.
So what we tell them, what we talk about is how to look at what the developmental need is underneath that behavior, right? And that if you address that, the behavior might extinguish or might go away or evolve into something healthier. So oftentimes in early childhood, what's underneath that is a desire for power, throwing a block or whatever the behavior is that's undesired, right? And so what I try to tell people is, we're wired to react to the throwing of the block. But if it's about power, then you have to think about all the other minutes during the day and the week that aren't about throwing the block, when you can give that child opportunities to experience power. And then that moment won't be as likely to occur because you've been attending to it throughout the rest of your time together, right? So I say all that to say that when we think about anti-bias work and holidays, we think about, we mentioned earlier that we use holidays because it seems to be an entree to talking about people who are different from us. But then it ends up and it tokenizes that person or those people, and they're not seen as a fully fleshed human being like we are. And so to me, the key is all the rest of those moments when you're not in your holiday. So when I heard Liz talking about bringing in an outside expert, unlike Heather, I understood her point. And I got that she didn't want an expert on Hanukkah to come in and teach Hanukkah. So when I talk with teachers about taking children out into the world, don't just think of it as a field trip. That should be something you're doing all the time, especially if you're in a homogeneous environment. Any chance you can get to take the children to someplace else is vitally important. But what's most important about that is the mindset of we're going there to build relationships. So we're going to the taqueria because we want to see how tacos are made, but we're also, because my big goal as an early childhood professional is community building, I'm not just meeting my community building goals within the four walls of my classroom. I'm bringing everyone else into our community. So when we meet the people that run the taqueria, we're getting to know them. We know their names. We're saying, do you want to come and read a story? Do you want to come back to our classroom? The kids love you, and we want to keep that love going. So then when you get to that Cinco de Mayo day, and we talk about who celebrates, oh, well, our friends, Rosa and her husband, remember them? We love them. They celebrate Cinco de Mayo. Maybe we should see if they want to come share something about it. Well, first of all, I've already established with the children and the family community that everyone can bring in anything that's meaningful to them from their lives, whether it's a holiday or a hobby or whatever. So that context and that precedent's already there. So now I'm just bringing Rosa and her family, and I'm giving them the exact same invitation. The children I've explicitly worked for them, for the children to make connections with people that resonate for them. And so that when those moments are needed, they feel they're not just a picture in a book of someone celebrating Cinco de Mayo. They're someone that they already know and feel emotionally connected to, who's telling them about their experience. And then to me, it becomes more meaningful and more concrete. In other words, developmentally appropriate.
And I think one of the things that may, for some people, present a barrier to that kind of community building approach is regulations and accreditation and quality rating systems that have some sort of multicultural, they'll usually call it, requirement. And it's easier to demonstrate that we've met that requirement if we can give them a Hanukkah lesson plan, or show them posters on our walls, and the dramatic, food in the dramatic play area. But which is fine. It's fine, but we should have that all the time, like you're saying, Richard, not just bring that food to the dramatic play area for the week that we're learning about that kind of otherness.
Yeah. And I would also just add in that my approach that I just recommended will not work in this time of COVID.
Oh, sure.
We're not going out into the community right now. So my suggestion is one that's a bit pie in the sky right now. So we got to come up with other ideas.
Yeah.
I think what's so important about what you were saying, Richard, is going into the community and inviting them back in, building. There are so many ways to build community relationships, right? But bringing people in on equal footing to you, I think, is just so hugely important. Then these are the people who cook the delicious food we enjoy, and there is so much love and care in cooking, even when it is on a large scale like that. But I just want to kind of highlight that as, bringing them back into the classroom as full people is just huge.
Yeah. And I guess, thank you, Liz. And I guess I would just add to that, or I would just continue to frame what I was saying earlier based on what you just said, which is I'm not bringing Rosa to my classroom because she's brown, because she's Mexican, or because she made tacos for us. I'm bringing everybody back to my classroom because that's my community, because my goal is to help children understand the broader community that we're in. Part of that is building the classroom community, and part of that is understanding our neighborhood and people who live in neighborhoods that we have to get into cars or on a bus to go see. And then I'm not asking them to come in, like Liz talked about the theater person earlier. I'm not saying to them, hey, we want you to come in and teach us about theater. I'm saying, hey, you're part of our community now. You're in our hearts. So come share with us something that's meaningful to you. And the person from the theater is going to share needlepoint. Like, that's fine, And if that's what I'm doing all the time, then the people that are different from us they don't feel singled out. The children don't feel they're being singled out because of the fill in the blank thing that makes them different. It's just everybody are people. Everybody is passionate about something and cares about something. And everyone is welcome to share that with us.
So I'm just going back through and thinking what people might be wondering about all the things that we've been talking about. And Richard, you've given some pretty clear examples, but I wonder if we could talk about ways to move away from plotting out your whole year around holidays. I mean, we've talked, we did a whole pajama party episode about theme planning and why we should move away from that, but planning your year specifically around which holidays is so ingrained. It's what we all came up doing. Most of us, I've definitely done it. And as I learned more, I moved in different directions according to what I was learning.
I almost think that
Oh, you froze, Heather. You're back.
Okay.
Go ahead, Liz.
We all know the stage, Lily and Kat's the stages of teacher development, right? And there are all these different phases. And I do feel like there is some, maybe it's not universal, but I feel like everybody I know who moved from holidays to not holidays did have that period like Heather was talking about, where it's just, oh, so we're not going to touch this. And usually as time went on, that graduated to, okay, well, if a kid brings it up and brings it in, we can do this. But, I think there's just so much personal and professional development that goes into it that is probably semi-predictably sequenced just based on the information that we all have right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I do think that the first step is just letting it go. I wish I could bring some part further than that, but I think part of it is just like, what are the kids doing? What are the kids interested in? What do they want to know?
Yeah.
Why are you writing lesson plans for 6 months from now?
Yeah. I mean, it's Lisa's 3 questions. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And who is it for? Can be really helpful when we're thinking about whether we should include, some kind of holiday celebration in what we're doing with the children.
Mm-hmm. Liz, I really appreciate you reminding us of Lily and Kat's, of putting this conversation in the context of those stages. Because I totally see that, and I'm glad you framed it that way. Because even I heard you say, well, sorry, let me back up. We were all enculturated into a society that where we're all sort of trained to think in all or nothing ways, black and white, all or nothing ways, right, wrong. And we're not really trained in terms of most of us, in terms of the critical thinking that allows us to see the shades of gray in between black and white, right? So even Liz just said, we go from doing all the holidays to doing none of them. Mm-hmm. And then you explained that. And in the context of the stages of professional development, that makes sense, that I would go from, survival to a place where the pendulum swings all the other way as I'm experimenting and learning how to improve my skills, to doing none of the holidays and just focusing on what's meaningful to the kids. Then the next stage, I would think, though, is where's the middle ground, right? I mean, what my experience of this field for so long is that it's either, as it relates to holidays, and right, I mentioned this in that video cast, is all or nothing. We either do all the holidays on the calendar or we do none of them. Mm-hmm. And I think the goal is to find some kind of middle ground. And your rudder is always are Lisa's questions and what's meaningful to these children today. Mm-hmm. And you're looking for opportunities to talk about diversity, whether that's holidays or otherwise, but you're always looking through the lens of what's meaningful to these little human beings today. Mm-hmm. And when you find it and it relates to holidays, you embrace it. And when you don't, you keep going.
Yeah. And so much of what I have done in the past, or what I've seen done with children during holiday weeks or holiday themes, reverts to ways of quote unquote teaching children that we know are not in line with how children really learn. So much of it is coloring in shapes that are relevant to the holiday, or sitting and listening about the holiday, and doesn't really fit, the active learners that we know children are when they're at the ages that we're working with them. this is happening again. Richard, when you said I froze up a minute ago, I don't think I really did. I was just out of words and I was just kind of spacing off. The video will tell the tale. But
I'll go ahead.
I just think that we just we sort of lose what we know is good practice or developmentally appropriate. And maybe with the good intention of creating this appreciation for a diverse world. But if we're not presenting that kind of information in a way that children can actively interact with it and process it, then we're still not teaching them about a diverse world. We're just going through the motions for ourselves.
Sorry, Heather, was there more? I didn't want
to. Oh no, I'm done. I'm frozen.
I wonder how much of this too is performative. How much are we doing this for the parents to say, look, parents, we're raising your white children to be appreciative of a diverse planet, how much of it is, like you were saying, of course, comes from the children, right? And how much of it is what we think we're supposed to be doing, and how we can make a non-holiday driven curriculum meaningful to the adults who are in these children's lives, who can then build on it at home, or at least understand where we're coming from when we say, oh, we love this. Yes, please, celebrate with us. And we're happy to follow along with what your family is doing. And also, I'm not going to be introducing Kwanzaa to my class.
Right. So to me, I just heard great things in what each of you just said. Goodness. That word performative is a really powerful word that's really popular, I think, with Liz's generation and younger. I think, because I didn't hear it until recent years in my life. But that could just mean that I'm old. But my way around, this is just me. In case you didn't notice, I am a white male. And so I was born into this body that's just got all sorts of privileges and assumptions about my power. And so, I'm just always, I'm just me. And I have been as a teacher since I was young. I've never been performative because because I'm a white male, I get everything I need. I don't have to perform for anybody. That's the mindset, I think, that I don't think I have, but anyway, it's just part of what informs me. But so if I am proactive with the parents and I explain to them right out of the gate, here's what your time with me is going to look like and why, then I don't have to perform about anything because I've told them exactly what's coming and why. Nothing's performance, everything is for this reason, right? But going back to Heather, what you said, one of the things that I come back to is, of course, the topic we often come back to on these podcasts, which is what is the foundational purpose of early childhood education? And we often agree that it's relationships. Mm-hmm. And so when you were speaking earlier, I heard you use some language that that really frames, invites the thinking of the mindset that we don't think is the most healthiest, which is I am a teacher. Yeah. So when you used phrases like presenting information, and earlier you said, Heather, the way you said it earlier in this conversation, which I thought was really a key word, when you teach about a subject. So I would just throw out there, and I know this isn't specific to holidays, but just to throw out a provocative idea for you two to respond to, teaching about anything is not developmentally appropriate practice in the first 5 years. Mm-hmm. Boom. Now, what do you think about that?
I'm going to argue, but first I want to make a correction to something I said earlier, and then I want to call you old. So, and actually, okay, no, this all kind of relates. So teaching about anything is not developmentally appropriate, saith Richard. I said earlier, the thing I want to clarify is I'm not bringing Kwanzaa into my classroom because I'm not qualified to present about Kwanzaa, to tell anyone about Kwanzaa, to observe Kwanzaa. So I just want to be super, super clear. There's nothing wrong with celebrating Kwanzaa. Right. I am not the person to bring it into.
That's important.
Yeah.
I just want to make that super, super explicit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Richard, you were talking about not being performative in your classroom, and I think that's because you've been in ECE for a very long time. I think that someone who has the competence and classroom confidence is able to articulate what their principles are and how they are presenting them and converse with families. I know.
Well, I was putting out there that I was doing that even when I was a very young new teacher, and that was in part due to my white male privilege.
I could see some aspect of that, right? Having the confidence that comes from being kind of default and right. So that does make sense. But I don't think there's anything wrong with explicit teaching in the early years when it's something the child is seeking to learn. I think there are many ways to explicitly teach a receptive learner that are completely appropriate.
But when it's
I
child initiated and it's not me imparting to a whole group, I definitely agree.
Right.
With that.
When the child wants to learn it, then it's meaningful, and we know neurologically it's going to have a greater impact on their neural connections. And you're 100% right, Liz. We need to be following their leads. But that's different than saying this week is tea week, so we're doing turkeys, and I'm going to teach you about the life cycle of a turkey, which so many of our lovely colleagues think that that's, or they're told by their boss, is what their job is supposed to be.
I think too, though, within the context of relationship, just like you were talking about earlier with people from the community bringing in things that they enjoy and are passionate about, I think there's plenty of room to introduce children to things that we're interested in and enjoy, and offer them the if they pick it up and run with it,
right,
to teach them.
Yeah, but to me, in the same way that you said, you kind of go with holidays, from teaching all the holidays to none. I feel like part of that professional development evolution is you go from teaching topics to maybe experimenting with teaching nothing and just letting children play. And then what I'm hearing you talk about, Liz, is kind of like the next step in your progress to a place where you can get your mind around a middle, a gray area in a middle place.
And I think even in those moments when, and whether it's holiday or not, when you see a child has an interest and so you want to help them learn about it, there still has to be an element that fits with how we know children learn about things. And that's by moving and by being actively engaged and using all of their senses. So even if you brought something in, Liz, that was a passion of yours, and you just sat down and started sort of interacting with it, when a child expressed interest, you're not going to say, wait, let's do a whole theme. And here are the coloring sheets we'll use. And here are the crafts we'll do. And that kind of thing. Here's the books. It's going to be something else. It's still going to be you with just that child who has expressed the interest, and maybe that draws other children in, but it's not going to be something where we sit down with our whole group and do a big circle time about whatever that might be. Which, lots of places try with 1 and 2 year olds as young as, so some 5-year-olds might be more able to participate in a setting like that. That doesn't mean that that's the way they're learning. I know you know that, Liz. I'm not teaching you anything. I'm just sort of thinking if there's a listener who said, oh yeah, Liz said we can still explicitly teach.
Right.
So I'm going to keep doing my holiday themes.
Liz.
Yes. Thank you.
I just wanted to sort of flesh it out through my own process a little bit. But.
Well, what I heard, or what comes up for me with what you just said, Heather, was, so I used to be a director of an Emergent Curriculum nature preschool, and it was always Emergent Curriculum in the handbook, but most of the teachers when I arrived didn't really understand what that meant and how to do it, and so it often looked like themes. What I hear you talking about is that line between Emergent Curriculum, where it's just constantly, by the day, the week, or the hour, emerging based on what children are interested in and what our greater community's passions are that get the children interested. But a lot of people will start that journey. And I don't know, I'm really so glad that Liz framed this as through the Lily and Cats thing, because it's making me think about this in a different way. Earlier on, when we're in an earlier stage, we tend to interpret that as themes. So this child's interested in Christmas. I'm trying to make this be about holidays.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And so I'm going to do Christmas art and Christmas music and put Christmas things in the dress up area. And then it becomes a theme, and it stops being an inquiry-based project.
Now Richard
Who's
froze.
Richard who's frozen this time, right? Okay.
Yeah, he's really frozen this time though.
Oh,
there he is.
could you hear me though?
No, you were just
Could
frozen.
you hear me doing that? Oh,
Nope.
I said the most brilliant thing of my whole career.
I don't doubt it. It's lost forever now.
I mainly was just repeating something Liz said. So.
Oh, okay. Well, then it must have
That's
been
how I
brilliant.
did
The most brilliant thing.
It was the most brilliant thing you've ever
That's my point.
Let's see. I'm looking back at the quote just to see if there's any other pieces that I wanted to specifically pull out, but I think we've covered a lot. I mean, I guess, the last bit of it is we overemphasize the differences between people rather than demonstrating the ways in which we are both similar and different from each other, which really is kind of a danger in any kind of anti-bias work that we're trying to do. That was another development for me. I thought, well, I'll just show all these different people and we'll read books about these different people and
crack the brown and white eggs, open the red and green apples.
Yes, exactly. We're all the same inside, without being, appreciating the concrete thinkers that we're working with and how explicitly we need to, and consistently, I guess that maybe that's what I want. Consistently, we have to have that message just sort of interwoven in everything we do all the time, if that's one of our goals, and not just 4 or 5 weeks a year. We pull out a way to talk about how people are different than the dominant culture.
Okay, I'm going to throw in a deep thought. So don't let me freeze, because this is important. We are all members of the animal kingdom. And so our species comes from a long line of survival based on, in part, fear, right? And so we're wired to think that any differences are something we should protect against. And it's so undergirded in our society, we tend to not even notice it, right? But we tend to immediately react to anything that's different as bad or a threat. And so, part of our evolution is becoming awake to that and aware of that, and then making some conscious choices beyond what our reptilian brain is telling us in that moment. We often talk about, let's just focus on our similarities when we're in anti-bias discussions. And that doesn't really, if our bigger goal is to help children make sense of the world in which they found themselves, the ways in which we're similar is part of that, but it's only part of the story. And many of us struggle with the ways that we're different because we have deep programming back there that says difference is bad. Right. And so for me, if I am continually in my time around children celebrating diversity, meaning like biodiversity, like, oh my God, I had no idea a flower could be that color. I didn't know a worm could be that tiny. That's so cool. I didn't know your skin could look the color yours does. And if that's just part of my wonder about the world and our wonder about the world, skin color and hair texture and holidays and all those things, they don't become tokenized. They're part of a greater culture in our year together of just having a sense of wonder at everything that's in the world around us. And on that long list, human differences are just one of many, many things on that list, and the ways we celebrate our holidays. So to me, it's that mindset that begins to overcome those fears that we're tokenizing or avoiding our differences.
I think we could have a whole other conversation now about what you just said and Piaget.
Let's do it. Write it down or you'll forget.
Oh, thank you. So you guys talk while I write that down.
Okay. Say something brilliant, Liz.
Oh.
Or just
What's
sing
it like to be a shy person on a podcast?
See, now I'm just talking to my friends Heather and Richard, so it's fine.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay,
with two very unshy people.
I stopped listening after Lizz Nolasco referred to me as her friend, and anything after that I've forgotten about because that was awesome.
Right. You
I
leveled
really
up today.
want to have this conversation with somebody even younger because I truly want the opinion of someone who was born in like 2002.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like someone who's grown up in a totally different world than any of us did, and just has experienced very different. I mean, I'm sure our own school years had a totally different approach to anti-bias than we're learning as professionals, right? And I'm sure theirs would be wildly different from ours and probably very different from what we're learning now.
Mm-hmm. Well, now they're going to all email me, Liz, and ask when they can be on the show with us.
Well, can I solicit comments on your Facebook page? Oh no, it's Facebook. Young people aren't on Facebook.
They aren't on Facebook yet.
But I would say that is really important. What you just said. We three dinosaurs are aging out, my friends. I'm pretty sure Liz's baby already is married and has children of their own. Pretty much. I don't know how. I don't know. I think Liz is that old. But really, the generational differences, it feels to me, and maybe that's just because I'm older, but the generational differences are marked. They're are distinctly different than with this next generation than any of the ones I've experienced so far. And I feel like as we continue on with the field of early childhood education, we need to be bringing in more of those voices because I want to make sure that what I'm saying is still relevant to the next generation of early childhood professionals.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
So
guess we should
Heather.
try it then. We'll see what I can do. I could probably rustle up some young folk.
Coming to you from the infant room of ABC Preschool.
I mean, that's a valid point because, I worked with graduate students in my job at Purdue before I was at where I am now. And they did call me out on some holiday and diversity stuff one year when I felt like I was really, because I knew what my own progress had been and I sort of had plateaued, and I was like, okay, so this is great. This is the way I do it now. And, they were a diverse group and they were mostly, early 20s and they had a much different perspective that I needed to hear. And, it annoyed me and I complained about it. And then I had to stop and really take it seriously. And then I got to learn something.
Same with my community college students, especially my Black and brown community college students. All the things that I've spent decades tiptoeing around and have fears around, they just go right straight in. And I start to realize, oh, I'm on the wrong page here. If I need to help them learn, it's not about the things that I needed to learn.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's true then too, if you're working in a childcare center and you've been there for 20 years, there's someone at your center who's been in there for one and has a whole new perspective that we may not listen to because of the fact that we've been doing it so much longer, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Listen to that 3-year-old instead of just doing your butterfly unit every April.
Yeah. Don't make us complain about themes again. That's where I feel like this is heading. We've had a robust conversation about that one already. Okay. Any last thoughts? Because I feel like I'm running out of things. This is good. This is what I was hoping we'd do. Let's just really unpack it and go wherever it took us. Yeah. Richard, why are you covering your mouth?
Because I have 20 more things I probably could say, and I know that we're out of time. So
okay. All right.
Being uncharacteristically quiet.
Okay. I could just mute you and you could go and get it all out of your system. I won't though, because I want to go eat lunch. Thank you both for coming on and talking about this topic with me. And I hope we get some comments and questions and feedback, so that we know how this topic resonates or doesn't with other folks. So with that being said, this has been an episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. Thanks for listening, and I hope you come back again next week.
Bye.
Bye.